Hello and welcome to those of you who are joining this Sutton Means Business first webinar of 2021. I can see you coming into our virtual room now. I'm afraid a bit like a real seminar, it does take a while to get everybody in through the door. So we'll just give it a minute or two while you all come into the room. It's a bit like a squeeze through the door. So I can see you coming in now. I'm delighted to have as many of you here as possible. We will get underway shortly as soon as I can see that everybody has made it in through our Zoom doorway. In the meantime, today's seminar is all about funding and grants relating to COVID. So if you would like to get some of your questions ready for our panel of experts, please do so. Our question and answer panel is open. So if you would like to start filling that in now, I would be very grateful. Right, I think we have everybody in the room now, so we will get underway with a quick poll. So if you can see a poll up on your screen now, I'd be very grateful to all our delegates if we could answer this. We are going to keep this poll running throughout the series of webinars hosted by Successful Sutton, and we'll be able to track progress throughout our time. Thank you very much. I've got lots of good responses coming in now. Countdown to the close of the poll. Please remember, if there's anything else you'd like to say or add, the chat function is open, and we look forward to hearing from you throughout the course of today and the whole series of webinars. Thank you very much. So welcome to all our attendees who are here today for our first Sutton Means Business webinar of 2021. We've got a couple of really excellent specialists here today to answer all your questions, mainly about funding and grants, but indeed take any relevant questions that we can today to help all the businesses attending survive the current lockdown and look forward to that lifting of lockdown and the recovery of some kind of economic function, hopefully in the near future. So can I introduce our panelists? We have Patricia Park, who is the bid manager for Successful Sutton, Elizabeth Harris, Opportunity Sutton service manager at the London Borough of Sutton, and Tony Terry, audit and accounts manager from Clarkson Hyde Chartered Accountants. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, but while we're doing that, if you would kindly start pulling your questions in from our panel, I'd be very grateful if you could put your questions on the question and answer panel, because it's a lot easier for me to see it there rather than the chat, and means that we can track all the questions. While that's taking place, Patricia, would you like to start us off today and just give us a welcome to all our delegates who are coming in? I see the numbers are still going up, so people are still coming in, but if you would happily welcome everyone in, that would be great.
They are. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming along today. I thought that we would kickstart with finance, because that seems to be the hot topic of conversation at the moment, particularly for a lot of our businesses who are looking to obtain some of the local funding that is available, may have not done so as yet, or maybe just find that they're not eligible for it, or may think they're not eligible for it. So what I wanted to do is ensure we had the right people on the call to be able to answer those questions particularly. I know it can be a bit of a minefield filling in forms, etc. So that's why I asked Lizzie to join us today, just to answer those specific questions. And also Tony from Clarkson Hyde, who is going to be talking a bit more about business finance and also management of cash flow. I think that's another key area. Much the same as in the first lockdown when we had this series of sessions, that was a key hot topic for everybody. And I think it's important that everyone is understanding about managing their cash flow, ready for reopening, having that budget to reopen, which is another key element, and also managing to kind of, get the right staffing in and making sure your overhead costs are kind of kept quite low in order to keep those doors open. So yeah, I'm really pleased that so many of you were able to join us today, and I hope you get something from the session. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Patricia. Can I turn to Tony now? Tony, would you like to just give us a brief introduction to yourself and to the sort of questions you're hoping to be able to answer today?
Got to unmute myself then. Hi, I'm Tony Terry. I'm audit and accounts manager from Clarkson Hyde. We obviously specialise in accounts and tax and business advice. I'm looking to help people with any advice or help any with the furlough scheme, the recovery loan scheme that's coming out in the new year, and any help they would like, or some advice on cash flow.
Okay, and over to you, Elizabeth. Could you just let us know what your role is and how the local authority is trying to become a signpost and help businesses during this time?
Yeah. So I'm service manager in our Opportunity Sutton team, which is our economic development team. So we're managing the additional restrictions grant at the moment, which is one of the grant funds which is available for businesses, which is being provided by the government to support them through COVID. And we work very closely with our revenues and benefits team, who are administering the main grants for businesses which have been forced to close by law, which are ratepayers. So we know it's a very confusing picture at the moment in terms of the grant funding which is available. We're hoping it will become simpler from April onwards, and a number of the grant schemes close at the 31st of March. So I just want to be able to answer any questions you have about the grant funds which are in place at the moment, so that we can encourage as many businesses as possible to apply for those if they're eligible.
Right, thank you very much. Well, I think, given I know this is quite a key thing, I think we'll just get stuck into those questions. Quick shout out to our audience. Please put the questions in the Q&A. You can also give me a wave. If you can give me a virtual wave, I can actually pull you in, and you can put your questions live to the panel, which is also nice because we get to hear some different voices and I get to hear from you directly. So can I just start off with the first question we've got here from Mariama, which is reflecting a sector that hasn't probably been specifically covered in many of the support elements that are out there. And she says, what help is there for businesses that have been set up but were unable to start trading due to lockdown? I don't quite know where to start with that. I'm going to start with Elizabeth to say, is there any actual funding available for those businesses? Before I ask if there's any other help our panel can supply.
So I think it depends on the individual circumstances of the business, which is the key thing, and the date that they started trading. So when the government set the criteria for the grant funds, they asked that the business is trading on the first day of each restrictions that particular grant covers. And their definition of trading, I can circulate after this, but for example, it's the business is actively being set up. It's preparing for opening if it's not been able to yet. So it's looking beyond that kind of date that the business might be incorporated. So if those particular businesses which are in the process of setting up are ratepayers and have been forced to close by law, they may be eligible for the closed or closed business lockdown payments, depending the date that they started trading. And then if they're not, for the additional restrictions grant at the moment, we're looking that businesses have a 30% drop of turnover. So if they've not been able to take any turnover in so far, they unfortunately wouldn't be eligible for the additional restrictions grant as it is, because they've not got that baseline of income and haven't been able to show that so far. So if people are ratepayers, they can contact our business rates team on businessrates@sutton.gov.uk. We can put that email address in the chat, and our website also sets out all of the specific details of the grant schemes.
Mariama looks like she'd actually like to come in to pose a question. So Mariama, I'm going to allow you to talk. You'll need to unmute yourself. We won't be able to see you, but we will be able to hear you.
Okay, hello everybody.
Even better.
Hello. The reason why I asked that question is during first lockdown, I was given an opportunity to set up a food unit in St Nicholas. But because of the lockdowns, we haven't been able to even start trading. So there's 6 food outlets in this project, and none of us have been able to trade. We was meant to start trading from last year, November, and it's just the dates are just keep getting cancelled. And now we've been told that we will be able to trade at some point, but we haven't been given any dates, and we don't know nothing. In the meantime, with this business, I haven't been able to do nothing with it, so it's just been in a dormant since last year. And when I've looked to see if there's any funding or anything from when I do start when we come out of lockdown, I can't find any form of help to help any companies that set their businesses up during that time who have no records. So the only records I've got is Companies House and, setting myself up within that revenue, but that's it. I don't have nothing else, no accounts.
Okay, thank you very much, Mariama. Is there anybody else that could help with this? Because Patricia, what is the position for businesses who are waiting to hear when things will open in terms of being able to get out there and trade?
It's a really tricky one because I know Mariama. I've known Mariama for a number of years now. I think that the issue is that obviously with St Nicholas Centre being a shopping centre in itself, they're going to be waiting to understand when they can actually reopen their doors to the wider public. Obviously, the vaccination centre is there at the moment, but that doesn't help the food offer that they're actually developing. So it's a developing offer on the third floor of the centre. The only suggestion I could make, Mariama, is your business as an entity has existed for some time. So Fats and Franks has been going for quite a while. I'm wondering whether you could use that as your baseline to apply for grant funding rather than this new unit, which hasn't actually started trading yet. Have you thought about it from that perspective instead?
No, sorry, Patricia. Hi, Patricia. No, I haven't thought of it from that perspective, because obviously where I got the unit, I rebranded, as you know, and everything else. And the idea was for Fats and Frank's Kitchen to, for Flavorful Kitchen to take over Fats and Frank's Kitchen, because now I've got the units, But I will look at Fats and Frank's. I
think that would be your option, because you've been using Fats and Franks has been going for some time. You had a stall, you've had a business trading under that guise, and I think that would give Lizzie a bit more leverage to then be able to look at supporting you rather than looking at this new space, which frankly, how long is a piece of string? To be honest, I don't know when St Nicholas are going to feel safe and be able to open or being allowed to open to the wider public. It's a contained space, so they've got to, the safety measures there far exceed that of anything that would be a retail frontage on the high street. So we've got to bear that in mind. But certainly from your side, whilst this is a new entity and it might not be eligible for very much support, sadly, I think that your old entity or the old entity you're now looking to rebrand would be. Because it has been an established enterprise for some time. So I would look at that, and then perhaps I can link you up with Lizzie for a further discussion about that, if that's all right with you, Lizzie. Once had a look at that.
That would be brilliant if you could do that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, my love, no worries.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next one. I've actually got a very similar question. Anchor, you're out there, and you've also asked that you're opening a new cafe in Sutton, and you'll actually get your premises on the 9th of April. So you're looking for advice on anything that would help somebody that was due to start on the 9th of April. I'm going to go over to Elizabeth for this one, because the only thing I can think of is presumably you will be liable to business rates at that point. Elizabeth, is there anything that's going to help people who are actually due to start now, even though lockdown hasn't quite lifted?
Yeah, I think I'd need to check the specific date that will be the eligibility. So the restart grants are going to be introduced from April, and they will be available to businesses in a range of sectors who are must all be liable for business rates, and including things like non-essential retail, hospitality and accommodation. But the government criteria for those will specify a date on which businesses needed to be trading in order to qualify for that grant funding. So I think the key thing will be to have a look at the definition of trading and see if your business fits within that, and almost if you're expecting to open the doors on the 8th of April, whether some of that setup activity that you're doing means that you would be eligible under the definition of trading. So I'll try and find that and post that in the chat, or if not, ask for that to be circulated afterwards so that you can have a closer look at it.
Thanks very much. I've got another quite detailed question here about time spans, and full marks if you know the answer to this one, actually. So this is from Mike Lawrence, who says they've received some discretionary grants so far, and he believes that the most recent one he received covered the period from middle of January to middle of February. So is there a provision to apply again for the period from middle of February to the 12th of April?
So at the moment, through the additional restrictions grant, which is the discretionary fund we have at the moment, we've got 3 different grant periods which we're able to administer grants for. So that was the November national lockdown, Tier 4, and then the national lockdown, which started on the 5th of January. The scheme closes to new applicants on the 31st of March, and at the moment we're processing those new applications as we get them in for the scheme as it is at the moment. We're hoping that once that's closed, we'll be able to sort of relaunch with the new grant scheme. So we have a set amount of funding that we've been allocated that we need to operate within, and that we can't exceed. But we are hoping that there will be further grant awards that will come after the current phase of that closes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to encourage everybody to keep those questions in, and indeed wave a hand at us if you would like to actually come on board and ask your question direct to the panelists. In the meantime, I was actually going to have a question over for Tony here, because it's an issue that I'm aware that's affecting a lot of businesses at the moment, which is that, I guess like me, they were all offered the opportunity to defer their VAT payments a year ago now, and all of those payments are now due. And sadly, we aren't quite out of lockdown yet, so it's quite hard to see where the income's coming from to fund that deferred VAT payment. So I was quite lucky and I'd set my money aside, but I'm guessing not everybody was in such a good place. What can people do if they've suddenly got two large VAT bills looming at the same time?
Well, the government started a VAT deferral scheme. So you have to go on to the HMRC website and apply yourself. Your accountant can't apply on your behalf. You have to do it as the business owner. A bit like the self-employed income support scheme. The self-employed individual needed to apply themselves. This is the same with the VAT deferral scheme, and the business owners, as long as they meet the eligibility criteria, so they're up to date with their VAT returns. There's a number of other eligibility criteria which I can get distributed later on. They can apply to defer the payment for 12 months. So equal 12 months payments of the VAT which is outstanding. If they can't do that, what they should do then is to talk to HMRC for time to pay arrangements. HMRC are quite lenient at the moment with these time to pay arrangements. So it's one of those two options really. Or if they have the money, they can pay the VAT all up by the end of the month.
Yeah, I guess that's a big lot of money coming out at the moment when cash flow coming in is restricted. And I don't know how many of our attendees today are also looking at having to start repayments on C-bills or bounce back loans. Are you getting a lot of people asking advice on that at the moment?
Yeah, we've got quite a few clients that we are dealing with at the moment that we're doing cash flow forecasts for. So we're taking what they predict their income or what their activity of the business will be, and how much cash will be coming into the business, and when they need to, and we apply when we need to allocate these payments, when the timings of them coming out, to see what impact it will have on the cash, or whether the company has enough cash to meet their liabilities. Quite luckily, a couple of the clients I'm dealing with will be able to meet, and some won't. And the ones that won't be able to meet the liabilities, we're having to come up with ideas of how to improve their cash flow to get more money coming into the business, or reduce some of their current liabilities or expenditure, so they have enough cash to meet the repayments they need to make.
I'm not clear actually in terms of the loans, because there was a lot of publicity around the government loans last year. Are they still available, and do I still call the same thing, or have they just come back under a different name?
Yeah, so we still got the C-bills and the bounce back loans, but these close for new applicants by the end of the month, so the 31st of March. If you haven't got your application in by then, you won't be able to go for one of these loan schemes. However, on the 6th of April, they're bringing out the recovery loan scheme, similar to the C-bills loan. So you get up to 6 years funding, no personal guarantee for the first 250,000 loan, and the government again guarantee 80% of the loan. So most banks will probably give you the loan. There's obviously other criteria that you will need to meet. It's more in depth, which I can get some literature sent out later on if needs be.
Okay, I think that would be helpful if we can get a link out either in the chat or going around to all our delegates afterwards.
Yep.
Elizabeth, I've got Ankur back. I think one of the challenges he's facing is apparently when he spoke to the council earlier was that the funds which are going to come out in April are there to support businesses with loss of business in January, February and March. And that's how you prove you've lost turnover and you've had costs, and that's how you were eligible for the grant. He's saying, as a new owner in April, will there be any relief for us? Which is interesting, because I guess none of us know whether there will continue to be grant funding in 3 to 4 months' time to cover the period post-April. I might be wrong on that, but I'd be grateful if you could answer it.
So I think it depends which grant scheme you're looking at. So for the additional restrictions grant, we are looking historically at a loss of income that businesses have faced, and that to see that they've lost income in the periods that I mentioned before. From November onwards. So in terms of the grant scheme that we're running through there, unfortunately, if the business is only to start in April, it wouldn't be eligible for the additional restrictions grant scheme that we have live at the moment. And then it's also the criteria that the government have set out for the closed and the closed business lockdown payments is that businesses do have to have been trading on the first day of the restrictions. So this unfortunately, if a business starts in April, they wouldn't be eligible for those because they don't meet the sort of mandatory criteria set out by the government. I have found the definition of trading for the potential restart grants looking forward that the government has set out, and some of the trading indicators they've suggested are, for example, that business has staff on furlough, the business may continue to trade online via click and collect. The business isn't in liquidation, dissolved, struck off, or subject to a striking off notice, or the business is engaged in business activity, which might be managing accounts, preparing for reopening, or planning and implementing COVID-19 safe measures. So it might, that's the sort of definition of trading that we're looking at. The businesses are in that way, doing that on the first day of the restrictions.
I have a sort of supplementary question, actually, which has come in from someone else about the Restart grant, because I think you've just mentioned some of the eligibility criteria. Do you have to meet all those criteria? Do you have to be a business rates player and be trading, and you have to meet all of them? It's not like you can say, it's not like a mix and match for some of them.
No, unfortunately not. For the closed grants and so for the closed grant and the closed business lockdown payments that we've been running, which take us up to the end of March, businesses have to be liable for business rates, and the substantive part of their business has to be closed by law. And then looking forward at the restart grants, businesses have to be again liable for business rates. And then the grants are available for non-essential retail businesses with one sort of tiering of grant funding. And then larger grants are available for businesses in the hospitality, accommodation, leisure, personal care and gym businesses. And the government's guidance for those sets out that essential retail businesses and takeaways are excluded from the scheme and can't receive restart grant funding because they've not been forced to close during the current restrictions. So businesses need to meet those criteria, and they need to be an active business at the moment, so they can't be dissolved in administration, have a striking off notice from Companies House, for example.
I've got a follow-up question here, really. Mike's saying, as a non-rate paying, non-essential retail business, is it likely that the government will allocate more discretionary funds to help people like him?
So I think we've got the additional restrictions grant at the moment, so that is open to businesses who aren't ratepayers, and it's open to businesses who haven't been eligible to receive the closed scheme. And if they've lost 30% of their turnover during the recent restrictions, they are able to apply to the additional restrictions grant. We've been given a pot of funding that we can use, and we've sort of launched the grant scheme and been running those and increased it as the restrictions have been extended at the moment. And then we are hoping to run a further grant scheme using the additional restrictions grant funding that we have at the moment. So we don't have the guidance and the criteria for that yet, but we'll publish that, and I'll make sure that we share that with Patricia to share with all of her members when it is available.
So thanks very much, Mike. I think that's, keep an eye out. They're trying to find as much additional discretionary funding as they can to help people like yourself. I had a final bit of one of our earlier questions to ask, which relates to business rates relief. And I don't know if someone could answer what the position is with business rates relief for this year. to come into the new business rates bills coming out? Elizabeth, are you my best?
I think I should be, but unfortunately, I think I'm got more of the focus on the grant schemes, so I don't have that information around the rates relief. But I can definitely find that out and come back to you.
Yeah, we'll get that one round afterwards, because it's a question I think a lot of us have, because there was definitely support with rates relief last year from when lockdown first hit, but I'm aware the next set of bills are about to land on everybody's doormats. And I'm sure that I have read something in the national press that there will be some relief, but I don't know the detail of it either. So we will see information around. Another question we have here, there's been quite a lot of talk about all those different grants. So we're coming to the end of one set of grants and one set of loans and going into a slightly different type of grants and loans going forward. Are there some very critical dates that our attendees should be aware of that they need to meet? I don't know where I should start with this one. But let's give you a chance to have a glass of water. Tony, what are the key dates that people need to be aware of in terms of some of the things that they can do? And I'm guessing that the 31st of March is probably when a lot of stuff changes.
Yeah, that's it. The 31st of March is the key date for the CBILS and bounce back loan deadline. The job retention scheme was extended to so that's the furlough scheme, was extended to September. The end of September, and there's slight changes in July where the employer starts paying 10% of the 80% salary, 80% furlough payment, and then August and September the employer pays 20% of the 80% payment as well.
Do you know what the cut-off date is? That at what point do people have to be employed on the current round of furlough for them to be eligible to take part in the scheme?
I believe that's still the 31st of October. I can double check on that, but I'm pretty sure it's the 31st of October, unless it's been updated since I've last checked. We have a specialist tax team that deals with all the furlough claims.
I know, I know lots of, because sometimes every time he re-announces it, that deadline does move, or has done in the past. So I thought it was worth asking the question as to whether or not it had moved again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the 31st of October, but I'll double check and then I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, that would be great, because I'm just going to say from personal experience, we had someone who was on maternity leave in the first set of furlough, and it was quite difficult to justify the fact that we were employing her at that point, so in order to be able to put her on furlough. So the dates do have an impact, probably above and beyond where it's obvious that they might be. Yeah,
let me double check and I'll let you know.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth, back to you. What are the critical dates coming up for the variety of grants that are out there?
So the key date is the 31st of March. So there are a number of grant schemes which close to applicants on the 31st of March. So that includes the open grants, which go back to Tier 2 and Tier 3, which seems a very long time ago now. But they're open to hospitality, accommodation and leisure businesses. Excluding takeaways, because the Tier 2 and Tier 3 restrictions were the challenge with people not being able to mix with other households inside, which is why they're particularly open to sort of restaurants and cafes where different households may come together. We also have the closed business lockdown payment scheme prior to the 16th of February, which closed on the 31st of March. And the current additional restrictions grant also closes on that date for application. So I think one of the key things about the current grant schemes is businesses do need to apply to access the funding which is available, because there's certain criteria that needs to be met, and it's not open. They're different to the schemes which were run back in spring at the start of the restriction. So it's really important that people do find those application forms and submit those. And I can put the link to the webpage in the chat where we have all of the information. And then I suppose the other key deadline is to keep an eye out. In April, we'll be launching the Restart grant. So we're working to establish that scheme at the moment and get the application form up and running. So as soon as we can in April, we'll be launching Restart, so people can also submit an application form for that scheme once it becomes available.
Thank you very much. Charlie Michael has very kindly answered in the Q&A that their business rates relief, apparently it's called expanded retail discount. So there is something available for retail. I don't know if it's available for other people as well, which is 3 months at 100% relief, then 66% off for the following 9 months. Thanks very much, Charlie. I think we'll see if we can find a little bit more information, also whether or not it can help anybody who is non-retail as well. As I'm aware, a lot of companies which are non-retail have been unable to use their offices or are struggling to get back to offices at the current time. I have a question from Rhiannon Ray, who says, if we have received funding before through discretionary restrictions grant, do we need to reapply for the current round? So I'm guessing you can only apply once in each round. So I'm assuming that she applied for the one that was, what, pre-Christmas? Because I don't think you can apply twice within the current round.
Yeah, so for the additional restrictions grant with the scheme which is available at the moment, we've been assessing applications for the 3 grants that we currently have available and awarding those automatically to applicants where they're eligible for them. When we were able to relaunch after the current grant scheme has closed, we'll let applicants know exactly how they need to proceed with that. So if a further application is required, we'll let people who've been successful for the additional restrictions grant so far know, or if we need any more information, or if the plan is to award grants automatically. So I think at the moment I don't have that exact detail, but we will keep people updated and let them know how to proceed.
Thank you very much. I've got a particularly tough one for you here, which I hadn't even considered would be a challenge, but clearly it is. Because a lot of the grants at the moment are being administered by local authorities, what happens if a business is moved from one council area to another? So what if a business has moved from some other local authority area to Sutton, but hasn't managed to get a grant either with the new authority or with the old authority, but maybe it ticked the boxes for the grant where it was situated previously? I think I've interpreted that question right. So how does that work?
So it would depend on the dates the business moved and which grant schemes they were wanting to apply for. So the key thing is a kind of, that eligibility date of the first date of restrictions for some of the closed schemes. So it might be that if they were based within a different geographic area, for example, up until, I don't know, the 4th of January, they should be applying for the old grant schemes through their previous area where they were the ratepayer. And then from the 5th of January onwards, if they were within Sutton, they should then submit an application to Sutton for the relevant periods. And similarly with the additional restrictions grant, we wouldn't sort of back fund grants for when businesses weren't located in the area. We'd look at the period of time they were in Sutton. But if people are in those particular circumstances and need more information, they're able to email us at discretionarygrant@sutton.gov.uk, and we can give a bit more advice about that, because it really depends on the date when people moved and the grant schemes that they're looking at.
I guess that's a really good point, which is that there are lots of nuances that aren't always clear from the eligibility stuff online. So I guess what should people do if they're unclear about their eligibility? Are you able to send around some of those contact details so that they can apply, or at least ask the question? I know that I've had to do it myself, just say, actually, I've read all the instructions and I still can't work out if I'm eligible or not. So
yes, absolutely.
Please really give me the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, so the grant schemes at the moment are split. So as I said at the start, revenues and benefits are managing the main sort of closed schemes, and we'll be managing the restart grant. And there's a contact email address for them. And then there's a contact email address for the additional restrictions grant. But we're in close contact between the two teams. So if the inquiry comes into the the different email address, we'll be sharing that to make sure that the applicant gets a response.
Thank you very much. Most of the questions we've had so far have clearly been from smaller businesses, and those in particular who are functioning as limited companies. I was thinking particularly about those that might qualify as self-employed, and what help might be available for somebody who's trading as a self-employed business at the moment. I knew about the SACE grants last year, but I don't know what's coming up this year. Tony, are you aware of what there is to help people who aren't functioning as a limited company, but are simply working as self-employed traders?
Yeah, so we've got the self-employment income support grant 4 and 5 coming up this year. So grant 4 covers, was it February, March and April? And it works on the same basis as the other self-employment schemes. So it's 8% of your 3 months average profits for 2019-20. And it's capped at £7,500. Your trading profits had to be could not exceed 50,000. So the key with grants 4 and 5 is that those who submitted their 1920 tax return before the 2nd of March can apply for these grants 4 and 5, where previously those people were excluded from the first 3 grants. And then grant 5 is the same as grant 4, where it covers May to September.
Thank you very much. I hope that's clear. I think the answer is, if you are self-employed, it's always worth talking to your accountant, who should be able to advise you on the best way to be able to get help that is available for you, because the grants are constantly changing and new ones are coming out. So you have to be on your toes to make sure you've made the most of what's available out there. That does lead me on to the, yeah.
Could I just add on that, that if people are self-employed, they are eligible to apply for the business grant schemes that we're running as well. So the trading status of a business doesn't have an impact on their application for the additional restrictions grant, or for the other grant schemes if the business is is liable for business rates and based within a commercial property.
I think that kind of leads us on, because I've got a question here from Faisal saying he doesn't actually know whether he's applied for all the grants he's entitled to or not, because it is quite confusing out there. He owns both a cafe and a hairdresser's, so he's obviously been confused between the various eligibility criteria for those different businesses. He says, how on earth does he keep up to date to see if he's missed any money which he's entitled to? Actually, Tony, I'm going to look at you for that one. I mean, if you were advising a client, how do you advise them to keep up to date with everything that they're entitled to?
Well, it's not as moving as fast as it used to be. I'd always talk to your accountant to see what you are available, because your accountant should know your details of your business much better than a third party. So you should speak to your accountant and they should be able to point you in the direction of which schemes you're eligible for, whether that's the job retention scheme, the self-employment loan, the self-employment income support scheme, or one of the loan schemes that's available, or they should be able to tell you which grant you could potentially request a claim for as well. But that's probably more specialist areas with those grants. They might be able to say that you can possibly get one of these grants, but you need to talk to your local council to confirm.
Thank you very much. Patricia, I know Successful Sutton are trying to keep everybody up to date as well. How can people try to keep abreast of all the information that I know you're also putting out about the help that is available?
I think the thing is, there's so much of it, isn't there? So I understand where Faisal's coming from. It just seems to be continuous flow. I mean, like Tony said, not quite as fast paced as it was before. It seems to have slowed down a little bit as to kind of a relevant, steady flow of information now that comes out. We always try and email out to everybody with everything that's coming via the council, specifically via Lizzie's team, particularly about grants and deadlines and so on. So we share that information out to the Levy District via email, but it's also on the website as well. And anything we can do, we also put up on social media. So it's always worth following what we're doing and keep popping back to the website. We have a COVID-19 support page, which is regularly updated with information, and also just to drop me a line. So if there are specific questions, and particularly within the Levy District, if you do need support in doing any of these things, or you've got some queries about how to apply for funding or need some support to apply for the funding or what you're eligible for, then just drop me a line and, I can pick up that conversation with Lizzie and we can certainly support you through a process. It's better to actually try and obtain it than not. And I think sometimes we get bogged down with what we can, what we can't. I would always suggest just go for it. apply for it and see what options are available that are sent back to you that are on the table, because it is a bit of a minefield for some things, and certainly with hairdressers, with hospitality, and with some of the cafes, if you are opening as a takeaway, you are restricted in some ways, but there is support available. It's just about finding which one you're eligible for, and ensuring you're applying for everything as much as you can. But certainly always drop me a line. I'm more than happy to help. That's what I'm here for. But certainly the website that we have is constantly updated with all of the links, particularly to the council's pages, and some relevant understanding of what the government is actually planning moving forward as well.
Thanks very much. And I know that Elizabeth has very kindly put a link in the chat as well, if you want to pick that up, which also gives a lot of also a lot of information about the help and support that's available. I wondered if I could just broaden out a little bit at the moment, which is to say that we've talked mostly about grants and funding, but I'm aware that there's a sort of almost a wider request kind of coming out there from people saying, well, I can understand the specific grant and funding, but is there any other additional business support in terms of helping me to learn how to manage my cash flow, in terms of helping me learn how to best apply, in terms of them having a better understanding of the business issues and how it is possible for them to pivot and adapt? That's a bit of a throw out to everybody on the panel. So if anyone would like to answer that one, just give me a wave, I guess. Elizabeth, come on in.
I'll make a start. So I think there's some really good resources out there, including through the London Business Hub that people can access. So there's a range of different webinars, advice, support, checklists and guides that they have on that website, including things like a property advice service that they're running at the moment. And also people are able to access one-to-one advice with an advisor. So it's done remotely at the moment, but you can speak to somebody who can offer advice and support about your business. So that's one of the key areas, the key areas to really tap into. We also have a business newsletter. I'll put the sign up link for that in the chat as well. And we try to use that to signpost to other support and advice which is available. So there's a number of schemes which have been running particularly since the start of COVID. And things like webinars, that people might find useful. So we have that available. That newsletter sent out around once a month at the moment, but we send it more frequently if there's sort of time-specific things that we're putting in there. So it's it's a good resource, I think, to find out what's happening with the council and more broadly with partners. But I think we're keen to kind of understand the type of support the businesses are looking for within Sutton as well. So, Patricia and the council, Patricia and our team are in close contact to try and understand kind of what help and support businesses are seeking, and what we can do to try and feed in some of that advice and support from our side as well.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers it. Anyone else want to offer? It would also be helpful, I don't know if you've got that phone number for the Business Support Hub. I know it's available on the government website, but if that could come out as well, I think that would be quite helpful, because they do offer quite good one-to-one advice, I understand.
I was just going to add that actually the Federation of Small Businesses have also launched a number of webinars, the free webinars to attend, which look at sort of different aspects that we've been discussing, things like the finance and certainly the support available from local government and central government, as well as just other business advice, particularly about managing overheads. We did another session just at the first initial lockdown, which talked a lot about managing overhead spend, and obviously retaining cash flow. And I think that is key for absolutely everybody at the moment. So any advice you can get, there's a lot of online resources. So I'll certainly send that out today as well. Some of the links to those things, as well as the Business Hub, because there is a massive amount of information flowing. And again, as we've talked about, almost too much to try and decipher which is the good stuff and which stuff you need. But I've been using a couple of bits from FSB and certainly the Business Hub to try and support us. We're still an operational business as well. So they've been quite beneficial. So I'll send out those links today via email.
Thank you very much. You're talking about overheads. You have reminded me, we've had quite a lot of conversations so far about rates, but not so much about rent. Obviously, rent still needed to be paid or indeed deferred during this period, and landlords still need to be paid if they're going to function. So there was a little bit of a hollow protection for businesses affected by challenges over their commercial rent. I think, is that about due to end? Does anybody on the panel know what the position is regarding commercial rent at the moment? No? No, I don't either. So that was a good one. We might try to find that one out, because I know there was temporary protection from businesses being evicted. Have I got anybody online that knows about that or has been affected by it? If so, just wave a hand at me.
I was just going to say that actually, aside from that, it was, I think, very much the start of the first initial lockdown. We had a conversation about this, and it was very much a case of people engaging with their landlords. And I think there was a lot of miscommunications, a lot of landlords who effectively are businesses themselves who needed to generate income from the properties they have as investment. I think that's mellowed a little bit. I seem to sort of, tell from some of the businesses, and particularly the people I talk to, that their landlords have been a lot more open to discussing how to manage that, because at the moment no one wants an empty premises. It's not a case that they couldn't fill it, but certainly is taking more time to do so. And if you've got an active tenant that is, has been paying rent and is, an active live business on site, you kind of want to keep that going. So it's worth having that discussion with them directly, if you haven't done so already, and just seeing what arrangements can be made. It is a difficult time for everybody, and some landlords are more understanding than others, I have to say. But certainly some of the ones that I've heard about have mellowed over a period of time and become a little bit more understanding to what people are going through at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I thought I just saw someone wave a hand at me in the audience, but I was mistaken. I was really hopeful that I could have somebody else come in and join us. No. Okay. So is there anything else that we would like to share? And one of the things we haven't covered really very much is that around employment and furlough. Tony, I know you've mentioned the sliding scale that goes under furlough, but there's obviously sort of a subsequent issue that goes with that about part furlough, how you might manage staff's health and well-being, because people are almost more affected, I think, by being on furlough than being at work. Patricia and Elizabeth, I think I saw a link go up from Elizabeth about health and well-being. Patricia, is there anything else that employers locally can do to support their staff at this time?
Well, we've been looking a lot at this, and there's a number of different resources available, again, online, quite a few different workshops and so forth. But I think that the key element from my perspective is understanding when people return from furlough, they're coming back to work after a very extended period off, and particularly during a time when there's heightened anxiety, and certainly there seems to be a much more increased risk of mental health during the period of time. They might have gone through bereavement. So it's being understanding as a manager and certainly as a business operator that people returning to work aren't just walking back in on day one and hitting the ground running. There are going to be some issues that maybe weren't there before, and certainly ways that businesses need to support people to come back. We're doing a mental health workshop on Friday, which everyone should have had, but I'll put the link out again for that. That's geared towards managers, managing staff return, particularly for people that are presenting with any kind of issues around mental health and anxiety, and also for themselves. I don't know about anybody else, but I've had literally a week off since last March. So you're kind of on burnout at the moment. I think a lot of people are. We're suffering from a massive amount of COVID fatigue, and certainly lockdown fatigue at this stage. So I think that it's important to understand and manage your own well-being as well as it is your staff's well-being. That would be the key thing for me. So I will send that link out to everybody so you have that. And yeah, so anything else further, it'd be good to have some suggestions for any courses or anything else that businesses feel that they need. We do often run training throughout the year. Normally it's first aid training or other bits and pieces, but I'm specifically keen and looking at this type of support that some of these employers need with their staff. So any suggestions from the group will be gratefully received, to be honest.
Thanks very much. I think the next webinar in this series is actually taking place on the 31st of March. I know it will cover HR skills and employment, but I expect this to be an issue that's covered that as well. So if people can send anything they would like in for that, that would be very helpful. The link for that will actually be going out later this afternoon. So if anybody's interested, please keep an eye out for that. we're running out of time now towards the end of our webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask Patricia a question, and then I'm just going to put a closing question to each of you so you'll have time to think about it, which is, what is your top tip to give any business out there at the moment who is struggling? So before we get to that, Patricia, I just wanted to know what the bid was able to do at this current time to forward plan for the time when we will be able to come back into our town centres, because I have a suspicion that you've probably been working quite hard on a plan.
Yeah, so we've been looking at the High Street Task Force plan as we did at the last lockdown, and seeing what we can implement on the High Street, and certainly to make it easier for businesses to return and make people want to return to the High Street after the end of lockdown, particularly, with footfall. Predominantly, we are a retail space, so we've got to think about how we're going to attract people back to the town centre safely, and looking at ways we can do that where we've got effective controls. We've certainly done the stenciling before. We've got a lot of signage up, and that will be repeated. But we're also looking at different elements as well. We want to make it a brighter High Street. That's part of our remit. We certainly want to make it a cleaner High Street. So we've got plans in place to be doing something towards High Street cleans and so on. There has been money made available from government, and I should be clear that what I'm trying to hold out for is access to some of that funding to support these deliveries. So hence the reason we're kind of holding back slightly. It will come to a point where we'll just move forward if that money is not going to be forthcoming, and we'll, as a bid, then decide what implements we're going to put in place for everybody. But in terms of just, coming back to work, opening those doors for the first time, if anyone needs anything at all, I'm hopeful that everyone has my email address and the contact details for the bid, and I would hope they would just reach out. I'm more than happy to help you in any way I can, or point people in the right direction of the people that are able to do that. But we'll certainly be announcing what we're planning within the next couple of weeks, so everyone is aware what's going to be happening on the High Street, and it will be visible, and everyone will be able to see and get involved as much as possible with that.
Well, indeed, you have been working hard. Your chairman, Nick Mallett's just come on the chat to say, yes, you've been working really hard to help everybody get back to as a good and new normal as we can manage. So just as we come now to our last question, I'm just going to go around in turn. Elizabeth, I'm going to just start with you to say, if you've got a top tip for everybody listening today for what they can do to make the most of what is out there for them at the moment in order to survive through until we get our bounce back to the economy that we are all hoping for.
I think it's, as I've been saying earlier, please do have a look at our website. And if you think you're eligible for the grant schemes we have on there, please do apply for them. And for a number of them prior to the 31st of March, because I'm sure there's a number of businesses out there who are eligible for that funding and haven't submitted an application yet. And we want to make sure that as many eligible businesses as possible can access the funding we have available.
Thank you. Tony, what's your top tip for all our businesses out there at the moment?
Just to be aware of your future tax payments that you need to make, and your bounce back loan repayments that will probably start coming during the next few months, and just manage the cash flow. There's a good book out there called Profit First, so that's a good read to understand a good way to manage cash flow. But yeah, just manage the cash flow and make sure you have enough money in the bank to meet your liabilities. And if you can't pay your tax bill or the bank, talk to him. Don't stick your head in the sand.
Patricia, what about you? What's your top tip today for our delegates?
I think it's just expectation. It's just managing expectation. A lot of people have returned to the High Street. Anyone that hasn't been to the High Street is relatively busy for a lockdown, I have to say. I think people are keen to come back out and keen to go back into businesses, but it's about perception. So my top tip would really be, if you are operating a retail or cafe space, ensuring that you're operating as close as you can to restrictions. They are difficult to follow in some cases, but certainly the perception of somewhere being clean, somewhere safe, somewhere that has strong control measures in place is going to set you aside from other places. It's going to make people want to come to you. That would be my top tip for everybody really at the moment.
I think it's always the top tip, isn't it? Stay visible to your hottest prospects. And even though it's harder than normal, keep out there, stay visible. Your customers will appreciate it and they will come back. And it has in fact been the general message, I think, of this particular webinar, which is that there is a lot of support out there. There is a lot of, I'm going to use the word leniency, there's a lot of kindness and consideration, because we are all in this together. So if you think that there's additional support or help you might need financially through grants or whatever, just ask. Everybody on this panel has said just ask, and everybody will do their best to give you the best advice possible, to direct you to the best support possible, and to help you get through whatever process is required to keep you running. I think that the community spirit that has come through from all the businesses has been truly amazing. So we're down to the last 5 minutes of our webinar. I have no more questions in from our delegates, but if you would like to get one in for the last 5 minutes, please still do so. Otherwise, I will just hand over to Patricia to close us down for today, and to talk about what is going to come next in the series of webinars.
Hi, so yeah, thank you so much, everybody that has come along. Just to reiterate, my email has been put into the Q&A, in the chat function, so it is on there if you don't already have it. Please contact me if you need any support at all. I'm more than happy to help. Thank you to Lizzie and Tony for joining us today to give us some answers to some very poignant questions, particularly around funding. I know it's a bit of a minefield, but there is money available for you. And again, I'm more than happy to support anybody if you drop me a line and see if we can get you access to some much needed support as we go forward. So our next session, we're going to be looking a bit more about HR. Returning to work, and we've touched on it today about people returning to work after furlough, and certainly how to manage staff that are returning and what the furlough scheme looks like up until September for employers, and obviously that part furlough, part working, and then how you can manage that. Actually, it's quite a good topic of conversation because it does also meet that kind of overhead discussion we touched on as well today, because obviously staff cost money. So if there's a way to manage that budget with your staff, part furlough, part work, it makes sense to kind of have a look at that as well. So that will be on the 31st of March. We'll email that out shortly. But this isn't a closed book. If there is suggestion from you as members of the district that you would like to see a webinar, particular session for support or something that we haven't raised as part of our webinars, then please drop us a line. And again, more than happy to pick up conversations with anybody about any support that they need.
Thank you very much. The information and contact details today will be sent around everybody. And the other thing is just to say, keep looking out. I think the lesson that I've learned as a business owner from the last year is that there is always new help coming available and coming online. So just because we think we might be coming to the end of lockdown, the help actually hasn't run out and additional stuff is coming forward all the time. So keep an eye out on those websites, keep asking the questions, and don't be scared to try. There's nothing stopping you trying for grants and funding, and finding out the great details as to whether or not you can actually get more support perhaps than you thought. So thank you very much to everybody who's attended today. I will look forward to seeing some of you going forward at future webinars. And a final shout out and thank you to our panelists for answering those questions today live. I know it's been difficult, particularly when we've had some very detailed ones, and where the answers haven't been possible, they will come out to the group later. So thank you very much, everybody. Wish you all a very successful afternoon, and look forward to seeing you all again. Cheerio.